Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Jim Dar's Tone Shifter channel, where we show you how to take any guitar and make it sound and play better. So join me in the Guitar Cabin, our musical sanctuary from day-to-day life, as we explore another really cool guitar project. I'm excited. Let's get to it. Well, welcome back, my friends, to the ever ongoing saga of the BasketCase Gibson Les Paul. Last episode, everything looked like it was going really well. I gave it a big thumbs up. I waited for the glue to dry, and in a couple of days, I strung it up. Then, the next morning, when I went to check on it, I was shocked by what I saw. But before we get into the details of that, let's review what we've done to this Les Paul so far and how good it was going up until now. Let's take a look. This poor Les Paul had seen better days. Somebody, in an effort to try to make it lighter or thinner, took a belt sander to the back, also took a sander to the neck, sanded through to the truss rod, and then gave it all up for dead. Well, that's when I stepped in after a couple people before me, and it was now my responsibility to bring this guitar back to life. My goal was to restore it as a player and not try to make it a 100% restoration to original spec. So I did my best to bring it back to life. We ended up taking a total of about 3/4 of an inch off the back from where it was at when it left the factory in 1974. You can see the replacement mahogany cap I got. Looks pretty good. And I was able to extend the control cavities from the back out. Now the neck is another situation to talk about. The previous owner actually took the truss rod out, removed the fingerboard, and routed completely through to put a 1/4 inch wide strip in almost the entire length of the neck. The strip wasn't quite deep enough from the fingerboard to the heel, so it looked like he used some epoxy. But I had to deal with that, so I chose to route it out the full length of the neck with a 1/2 inch wide slot. I was going to plug it with mahogany, and I thought that would give it good structural strength, but adding more pieces of wood to the neck could potentially weaken it as well. It was a risk that I think needed to be taken given the situation with the guitar. So here comes the error in judgment on my part. When I was drilling from the headstock back through the neck plug that I just put in, I wanted to avoid blowing out through the back. So I used the existing truss rod hole in the headstock and angled it to be as parallel as I could to the neck to drill it back. It's something I've done several times before when restoring guitars. It's always worked out fine, but I think my drill was too shallow. And when you take a look at the maple spline insert that goes down on top of the truss rod between the truss rod and the fingerboard, you'll see on the extreme right-hand side of this picture how it tapers a little bit rather than following an arc. I've also done a hand drawing that shows this as well. I'll show you that in a second. So what happened, I strung the guitar up. It played pretty well. I didn't try to do a lot to adjust the action. And I came to the cabin the next day, and the guitar had an awful amount of relief to it. So I thought, no problem. I'll tighten up the truss rod and that should go away. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way. When I tightened it, the rod felt very stiff and seemed to adjust the upper register frets more than it did the first couple of frets toward the nut. So it cranked it a little more, and I said, wait a minute, something's got to be wrong here. Maybe there's glue on the truss rod. So I loosened it, tightened it, loosened it, tightened it, with making sure I didn't over tighten it. And at the end, I got the same result. The action was pretty good in the mid to upper registers, but around the nut, the first 3 or 4 frets, it was definitely relieved to the point where it needed to have some major attention done to it. Let me illustrate what I think happened. A normal arc of a truss rod should be fairly consistent throughout. This drawing shows the nut, the truss rod adjusting nut on the right hand side, the rod having a nice gentle curve to it. The big dot to the left is the anchor in the fingerboard. And this is the way the second drawing, what I think happened. My drill hole from the nut adjustment area through the neck, I believe, was too shallow, causing a little bit of an S curve in the truss rod. Never had that happen before. I think that's likely the cause here, but it could be a couple other things. It could be that I put tension on the neck too soon and that the glue wasn't dry enough all the way through. That was my initial thought, and then I got to thinking about the difficulty I had fitting that truss rod in that portion of the neck. And so I'm really not quite sure. It could also be a natural curve in the fingerboard. The fingerboard was curved that way, but I decided to use a heat press to put a little back bow into the neck and see what that would do. You have to be real careful you don't burn the wood, burn the materials around the wood, or burn the house down when using a heat gun. I had to set this on a low setting. I used a square hollow steel tube, maybe it's about 1.25 inches square, and I've got holes drilled in it to let some of the heat come out, but I want to try to maintain heat in there as much as I could, and just put a slight back bow in with the C-clamp, and there's a caul on the bottom that you can't see, and then I put a spacer under the nut to first fret area. That acted as my back bow leverage with the straight bar and the clamp. I wrapped the headstock up in cloth and was very, very careful not to get it too hot so I would burn something. I actually burnt the neck a little bit. It got a little too hot. And you can see I've got a mahogany plug that when I was done with the heating that I put that in the rod to try to maintain some of that heat. The goal here is to soften the glue up. So I'll repeat the process, heating the tube up about every 5 to 8 minutes for about an hour or so, just to make sure that the heat from the steel tube gets channeled into the neck and fretboard and so actually softens the glue. And then let it sit that way for at least 24 hours. And then another 24 to 48 hours before you put tension on the neck. So I think it's going to work. I feel confident, but we'll find out. Next time we'll find out for sure. Worst case, it's a killer slide guitar. Best case, we fix it, level the fingerboard, level the frets, put some new frets in, and you have a great player. That's what I'm still shooting for and hoping we can attain. So when I sit back and look at this whole project, I had debated whether to put a two-way truss rod in the guitar or not, and I opted to go with a single action truss rod, Gibson style, actually a Gibson rod that I had. And I still think that was the right move. Obviously, if I was building the guitar new or if it was a less of a desired guitar, I'd probably put it with the two-way truss rod where you have that way you have total adjustment. But I think I made the right choice. I think I just drilled it at a little bit of a angle that was too shallow. Time will tell, and as long as the neck stabilizes, we can actually do something with it. If it continues to be wonky and move, well, that's another story. Get your slides out maybe, I don't know. Hey, thanks for watching. I do appreciate your comments and suggestions. Please subscribe, tell a friend to subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications. And until next time, be kind, be smart, have fun. learn something new every day, but most importantly, be safe. Thanks for your support, everybody.